Hello, and thanks for tuning in. As always, this is Reverend JR, and today we're going to take a look at a video from Buzzfeed where people tell a pastor why they don't believe in God. Let's just jump right into it.
I don't personally believe, right? But it's like, that doesn't mean that we can't live the same way.
Hey there, I'm Erica Campbell. I'm a singer, a songwriter, I'm a mom, a wife, and all-around cool chick. So today I'm sitting down with people from different ends of the faith spectrum. We're just gonna have a healthy conversation. Can't wait to get into it. I'm really excited.
Let's see how healthy this conversation is. I wonder how varied these opinions are going to be. This is BuzzFeed, after all.
My name is Josh, and I am a former Christian.
Hi, I'm Emily, and I identify as an atheist.
My name is Nina, and I identify as agnostic.
Alright, so it's important to note those are three different things, obviously. One is formerly Christian, so I wonder what he is now. One of them is atheist, which is fine, because you're making a belief statement. One of them is agnostic, which is less fine, because agnostic deals with knowledge, not belief. Deals with whether or not we can know if there is a God, not what you actually believe. Although, like Penn Jillette said, if you don't know, then you probably don't believe. So we'll go with that.
I was raised in a very strict Mormon household. I was the very first one in my family to leave the church. I have been a happy non-believer ever since.
I guess technically I was raised in the Catholic faith, kind of by default. We went to church sometimes on Christmas, usually like weddings or funerals, something like that.
I grew up lightly Hindu. We're like culturally Hindu, but I kind of came to the conclusion that like whether or not there is a God or there isn't a God, like it has no bearing on like how I live my life.
So we got three people. One of them raised as a Mormon, one of them raised as a Catholic, and one of them raised as a Hindu, who are all three basically atheist at this point. I think we're on point so far.
I don't think she'll be able to in any way convert me suddenly back.
I'd be lying if I said I wasn't nervous.
Like I hope I don't say anything to offend her.
So here's the thing. You're going to tell somebody you don't believe in their beliefs. Some people are just going to be offended by that no matter what, because some people can't tolerate ideas that are not their own. And this is BuzzFeed, so we'll see what happens.
Hey,
Hey there,
I'm Josh.
I'm Erica.
I'm Emily.
Erica.
So nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Hey.
Hi.
Nice to meet you.
And Nina?
Yes, I'm Nina.
Erica. Nice to meet you.
Was that really necessary? We get it. Why can't we do these one at a time, BuzzFeed? You're not Quentin Tarantino. We don't need to break it up every 5 seconds to do something different and show us different stories. It just doesn't need to be done that way. Do one at a time. See where it goes from there, so it's not disjointed and you're not forgetting, necessarily, or being unable to keep straight the different stories they're giving. It just seems like a bad choice stylistically, I guess.
So I'm a Christian. How would you identify?
Atheist.
Atheist.
Non-believer.
Okay. So do you believe that like there's no God or there's something out there and you don't know what it is?
Nothing.
Nothing.
And there we get to the point. BuzzFeed has told us 3 times now what these people believe, and we're a minute and a half in. We don't need all the flowery stuff. BuzzFeed, just get to the meat of it.
I identify as an atheist.
If like agnosticism and atheism is like a spectrum, I'm like somewhere in it.
I think that when we die, it's lights out, and that's the blissful end to all of it.
So there you go. I mean, that's simple enough. We're dealing with the afterlife now, which doesn't require God, like you have in the various Buddhist or Hindu beliefs where they have reincarnation, karma, dharma, samsara, and they're just forces of nature, they believe, rather than anything to do with a god orchestrating any of it. But the point remains.
Is that bliss though? Like
It
that?
is.
So let me ask you a question. What do you believe exists beyond the universe? It's like the area where our minds kind of exist. Not the human, not the tangible.
I don't think that exists either.
You don't?
I don't.
This lady seems really confused that people don't believe in things that she can't show evidence for. What do you believe is beyond the universe? There's no evidence for anything. Where do you believe your mind is? I believe it's in my brain, and that's where it exists, in the chemistry that happens there, where the, neurons fire, and that sort of thing. I don't believe there exists somewhere that I'm viewing this from outside of the universe, independent of it, and I agree with the fella making a statement there. And even if there was, it doesn't mean that someone made it. It would just mean that we exist there also. But we'll let him continue.
I think that everything that exists is what exists right here, right now, in this moment, in your body.
So he's somewhat of an existentialist. Which is fine. I think most people are to an extent. I believe that the universe exists, just as it is. You can see this video on your phone because it's a real thing, not because magic fairies in another dimension are shipping the video to your phone, no matter how mystical you might think wireless communications are.
I was raised in the Catholic community. I just remember the first thing we talked about was Adam and Eve, and I just remember being like, that's just like a little story.
Culturally, we're Hindu. Personally, for me, it felt like a lot of the stories of it, they're just like stories.
And that's fair enough. These two people are saying they don't believe them because they don't seem to have any credence based on what they observe in reality. I can agree with that. That's a fine position.
There's a lot of like people with multiple arms and like angels are blue, which is like not real.
So I was raised Mormon. My mom helped run the Relief Society. My dad was a bishop for a long time. My grandpa was a bishop. I was the very first member of my family to walk away from it all.
Which, if you're familiar with Telltale or John Cedars or some of the other ex-Mormon, ex-JW YouTubers, that's a really hard thing to do. So that's an appreciable quality to walk away from a cult that is telling your family that they should disown you and pretend you don't exist when you leave the only society they've brought you to know. It takes a special kind of logic to break bad logic when all you've been conditioned with is bad logic.
And
They respond to that.
not well at first.
I grew up similar to you, but mine was a Pentecostal church called the Church of God in Christ. And my father was a preacher, my mom was over the choir. But there was a lot of things that didn't always make sense to me, like why we were so poor. If you live for Jesus, everything's supposed to work out right, But the same way, I wouldn't doubt love because people have gotten love wrong. And that's kind of how I feel about God. And I think it's very reassuring to me that after this is over, there's something greater.
So basically, she wants it to be true is why she believes it. She falsely equivocates the idea of a God who knows and does everything because he can do everything, and therefore anything he doesn't do is a choice, with the idea of love, an emotion, or a state that expresses how we interact with one another on different levels, that has nothing to do with being divine or all-knowing, or all-seeing, or all-powerful. Love is not a force that created the universe, as God allegedly is. Love is not a universe that can, move mountains and stuff, as God claims he can do by shaking the pillars of the foundations of Earth, and so on. Love, the relationship, the feelings associated with it, are all things that we can measure and look at and see how people interact through psychology and sociology and physics and chemistry and so on. But a God who allegedly made all of that, we can't. There's literally no evidence for it. And she equivocates the two things like they're the same thing, and she puts equal credence in both of them, and nobody really addresses this point, as for a reason they don't believe, even though I think the three atheists in this video basically have the same mentality in that regard.
So most people who don't believe there was some, traumatic church experience or some long line of this doesn't make sense, this doesn't make sense, this doesn't make sense. Okay, y'all don't make sense, so maybe he doesn't make sense.
Which is a fair point. The Bible claims to be the literal divine wisdom of God. And if you're saying part of it's wrong because it's written by humans, and then you have to explain to me why the parts that say, well, it was written by God, except for the parts that weren't, and we have no way of knowing it, so I just feel it's wrong. This isn't exactly the argument she's talking about. She's saying, well, there were people in the church who were jerks, and so I'm not going to believe in God. That's not generally how people become atheists. Those people generally change churches to be in a more socially acceptable group of people. The one where you go, this and this and this doesn't make sense, that's why I don't believe in God, that's closer. But even if there was such a God, I would have to believe in him if there were sufficient evidence for him, or her, or them, or they, or whatever. But currently there isn't. There isn't evidence for a global flood. There isn't evidence that the earth is flat, and that it has corners, or that it's held up by pillars, or that it has a firmament, or that Sheol exists under it, or that a man came back from the dead after 3 days and ascended literally to heaven to sit by his Father who is God. And there's no evidence to suggest that we have an afterlife, and so on. But again, if you're claiming the stuff in the Bible is true because it comes from God, then you have a much higher burden of proof to meet. I can't just accept that on blind faith. I can accept that I have a green screen behind me, because I can see it there. I can show it to you. I can put something on it and make it work like a green screen. I can adjust the computer program to make it show whatever I want.
But can you do this?
But I can't do anything like that with a god.
I do find fault with like Catholicism in general.
We're not really like practicing, so we weren't like praying or like studying or anything. And so I just kind of like fell away from that as a religion.
See, that's interesting though, because the implication is that if she had just prayed more or done more of the rituals or this, that, or the other, that she might actually still believe it. And that's not really a good place to come to terms with atheism either, because you shouldn't base it on whatever your routines are. You should base it on the logic that comes from thinking about whether or not things are true, or apparently true, or whether they have obvious evidence for them, or subtle evidence for them. You shouldn't say, I didn't really get into it because we never did much with it, and that's why I don't believe it. Because that's not a strong argument, in my opinion.
I got kicked out of Sunday school because I was arguing with the teacher about the age of the earth. In 6 days, 6,000 years, I'm like, but dinosaurs.
I grew up in a church where secular music was a saying everybody was the devil, you know, you can't interact, you know, it's gonna infiltrate you.
Which is fair. It warns against these things in the Bible that represents the God you claim to believe in. Now you're willfully violating his tenets by becoming a woman who speaks in church. But you still think you've got his interpretation correct. And other people don't. Instead of just saying, hey, maybe there's not an interpretation because it's all fantasy, you say, well, they're wrong because I disagree with them. But, you know, why are you an atheist because you disagree with some of us? As she said earlier, basically, as one of her reasons for why people leave the church. When she herself did exactly the same thing, and now no longer believes in the same God as the people who believe in the God of the Bible, except that she claims they don't believe right. Do you spot the confusion yet? It'd be nice if there was some evidence and we could figure out which of these people was right, so we could follow them. But the evidence doesn't appear to support any of them, and that's why I'm an atheist and I don't believe any of it.
My mom, her favorite saying growing up was that the devil gets to you in little ways.
Yes.
Like the first time I wanted a mohawk at 9 years old, she was like, devil gets to you through your hair. Like,
Yeah.
But at the same time, why can't we see the devil? If the devil really gets to us in any tangible way, why can't we measure that? Why can't we catch him in the act? We have cameras all over the place. We've never once taken a picture of an angel or a demon fighting for our souls. We've never once seen these demons interact with humans in anything other than, you know, hallucinations and visions and dreams and stuff that your brain can just concoct. I mean, again, I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm saying there's no evidence for it and I don't believe in it.
I got really lucky and I have like great parents and, you know, they were like, you know, be kind, be a good person, like help each other out, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So I feel like my moral compass
It's good.
But yeah, if you don't base your beliefs on the Bible, then you can go out and do things like be a preacher and be a woman at the same time. Or not murder your children, as the Ten Commandments demands you must, when they disrespect you the first time. And it's interesting the people who believe in the Bible, who believe God handed down these stone tablets, don't actually believe what's written on them either. But maybe that's for another video.
I hope so. I think so. I'm working on it.
the core of Mormon belief is the Holy Bible, the King James Version specifically.
Yeah.
Every time I read something, what I saw was a twist for human gain.
I know the same stories and I had the very same questions. And what I feel like, you know, what I know the Bible is, it is all an example of how crazy and chaotic our world is.
But it's not. There's plenty of stuff in there that says God did this thing specifically. God opens the floodgates of heaven, and that's why we get rain. God killed the earth with a flood, and that's why there are rainbows. It doesn't say there are rainbows because light diffracts, because people didn't know at the time the Bible was written that light came from sources outside of the body. They thought light came from in your eyes. And a famous Islamic scholar around the I think it was around the year 1000, found an elegant proof for why that isn't the case. But anyway, let's go back into this.
If you believed in God, what would that look like to you?
I feel like if there was a God, I think it would be something like kind of unimaginable that I couldn't like process as a human being.
So you see, she asked, if there was a God, what would he look like to you? And I'd say, okay, if there wasn't a God, what would it look like to you? Just to demonstrate how weird that question is. If there was a God, what would he look like? If I had to answer that, he wouldn't look like a human. He wouldn't look like a creature at all. He'd look like some kind of divine, intelligent being who may not have a body. Probably wouldn't have any of the characteristics you and I associate with, physical nature. Anything you can think of would not qualify, because anything you can imagine existing in this universe is not what it would look like. It's literally not something I can imagine, because it literally exists outside of anything I can imagine, which is the entirety of reality plus anything that my brain can construct. It's not going to look like a keyboard. It's not going to look like a nebula. It's not going to look like the universe. It's not going to look like neurons. It's not going to look like a blanket. It may not look like anything at all because light may not interact with it, if such a thing existed. If we wouldn't be writing about it in simple little books, because it would be incomprehensible, and it would likely have no way of ever communicating with us.
Do you believe in life after?
I don't. Before I was like, I don't know, maybe like raw energy, like what happens to us when we're dead, and nobody knows. And that's the crazy thing, right? And, but very recently, actually, my twin brother passed away this summer. And so thank you. But I've been, searching for him, and I've been trying to be kind of open, if it is a thing, please freaking talk to me, you know what I mean? And I haven't felt it. I haven't felt him. I haven't seen him. Yeah. And so that kind of for me was okay, he's just dead.
And that's the thing, when you're talking about afterlives, the girl says it right. Nobody actually knows. But the lady with the blonde hair is pretending to. She's believing in something with absolutely no evidence. I want to believe there's a place where my family will be. The girl with the ball cap is no, it'd be nice, but it doesn't appear to be true. Which is how you should evaluate every belief you have. And that's in any aspect of life, politics, religion, science, anything. If you believe things that are not evidently true, then you're lying to yourself, and that can be dangerous.
And that's, something that I'm just kind of okay. I'm just never gonna see him again. He's still, with me every day, and I think about him every single day. But it's I was open for it, and I still am, if something were to happen or whatever, but me thinking about him every day and remembering him and everything that I do, it's I feel like that for me is enough,
Every time I look at any form of organized religion, the only thing I see is division. More wars have been fought over religion than anything else. Yeah. Whereas when I look at a world with no religion, everyone has to own up to just what they are and who they are. They can no longer hide behind and say, well, I won't bake a cake for these gay couple because my religion says that I don't have to.
That's another good point. If it weren't for religions dividing us, a lot of us would get along a whole lot better than we currently do. We could have potentially gotten rid of our tribalistic nature a lot longer ago if we could all agree that we're all humans, rather than everyone who isn't like me should be my slave and I should conquer them because God tells me to. So, he makes a very good point. Religion is kind of toxic, because it forces you to believe things for which you have no evidence, and if you question them, people will kill you in the name of their God. It's one heck of a drug, isn't it?
You can't hide behind that.
There's always going to be conflict in religion because religion is man-made.
You heard it there, folks. What kind of pastor is this? There's always going to be conflict in religion because religion is man-made. See, I don't think that's entirely true, though. Because there's plenty of things that are man-made which do not cause great amounts of conflict and suffering, like codes of law. I don't think it's flawed because it's man-made. I think it's flawed because it's a collection of lies.
You see these movies and there's always a devil on one shoulder and an angel. I really think that's real. I think there's always a battle for the best of us and the worst of us.
So you believe right now that there's potentially, literally, a guy sitting here and a guy sitting here, or a woman or whatever, some kind of humanoid being, presumably, and you think it's constantly telling you, do the good thing, do the bad thing, and you're choosing which one to listen to, regardless of what they tell you. This one says go rob a bank. This one says don't go rob a bank. And you believe not only that one of them is correct and one of them is incorrect, but you believe that God placed one of them there and can't remove the other one. And you believe this God who can do anything can't get rid of the evil that exists in the world. Even if there were evidence for that, which, there isn't, I wouldn't worship a God who can do everything but allows the evil voice to exist and allows me sometimes to act upon it, to cause suffering to others. But what I want doesn't play into what I believe. I don't want for there to be wars, but wars are real. I can't just deny them. I don't want for there to be all the bad things in the world, like food poisoning, but that doesn't mean food poisoning doesn't exist. And it doesn't mean I'm going to join a religion that says food poisoning doesn't exist. I don't want cancer to be real, and it'd be lovely if we could treat it with flowers and essential oils, and shoving stone eggs up your vagina, or whatever. But no matter how much I want simple things to be true and fix everything, it doesn't mean they are just because I join a religion that believes it. And that seems to be the flaw in the reasoning here. The fly in the ointment, so to speak.
If there was one question of God that you could ask if you believed in God, what would you ask?
I only get one? I'd have to ask, if I only got one question, why create suffering in the first place? Because that opens up a whole lot of things. And then if God just says, I'm kind of a dick, or I just wanted to see how it goes, I'm a scientist, or I didn't realize it was suffering because I can't feel that, even though he knows everything somehow. Or he says, because I didn't actually create anything, I'm just observing it, and there are strict laws that prevent me from doing anything in the reality where I am. Or God just says, because I can, get over it, and then pops you out of existence, and your suffering never existed because now you have no frame of reference for it. But if I could ask God one question, that would be a decent one. Certainly not the best. Of course, he doesn't have to answer any question anyway. If an ant walked up to you and asked you a question, do you think you'd realize what it's doing? Even if it thinks you created it? Do you think you're going to have a meaningful answer for that ant as to why suffering exists? Why some ants die? I don't think I'd have a good answer for it, apart from, that's evolution, bro.
That's a really hard one.
Is it? Girl, ask everything.
And there'll probably be a lot of general just like whys.
But he cares about you.
So, God cares about me. That's why he let me dissociate my wrist the other day. That's why he gave me gout and high blood pressure and a predisposition to eating things that make both of them worse. That's why he makes alcohol so enjoyable, but lethal also. That's why the sun will give you cancer. That's why the planet we live on is designed to destroy us slowly, or a little more quickly, potentially, just by living on it and interacting with the things God put into it. That's why humans can't breathe underwater, and we drown when we fall into it. Because he cares about us. That's why he sends the majority of us to hell, according to the Bible, to be tortured forever, even if we did nothing wrong our entire lives. Even if we died as a child who could do nothing wrong. Do you see the flaw in this reasoning, lady? I don't have to ask God, I'll just ask a lady in the hair, with the blonde hair. Maybe she can give me the answer from the book that her God allegedly divinely inspired and revealed knowledge in. Of course, she'll translate it, but whatever.
And that's what I know
Does
for
he?
sure. Yes. You. What makes you happy? What makes you sad?
I feel so small. And like the concept of a God, it feels so big, like I said, and I feel so small, and it seems impossible to me that anything that oversees like our whole world or our whole universe would have time for me.
Absolutely.
That's another really good point. If a God is real, let's pretend, let's say our galaxy exists on a grain of sand. Like, how big is our galaxy? Boom. 100,000 light years. All right. That's fine. How big is the observable universe? 93 billion light years. So, if a grain of sand was our entire galaxy, 2 millimeter grain of sand, the observable universe is about 1860. But yeah, it's basically that big across. And if that grain of sand took you 100,000 years to get across, then it would take you 930,000 times that to go the entire kilometer and a half, or 1.8 kilometers. So needless to say, that's a very big distance. Now, if you look at that grain of sand, let's pretend you're God, and God is approximately your size compared to that universe, or let's say your God is bigger than that kilometer. Do you think you're going to be able to communicate with 7 billion things that exist in the tiniest fraction of that you can't even measure at this scale? And you think you care about every single one of them, infinitely. Enough that you would send them to a place of eternal torture if they didn't believe in you. Because that's what this lady is suggesting right now. Just saying.
I think that there's still a lot of questions there. You know what I mean? Even from what you've said, still a lot of questions. And I think that's the best way to be, like to always ask why, the whys of the whys. Why do I feel this way? Why don't I believe? Could I believe again?
Right.
Perfect questions. I absolutely agree with her right here. It is absolutely essential to question why, but you can't stop at questioning. You have to look for evidence in support of your opinion as well as against your opinion, if there is any, in either direction, and then base your opinion and beliefs upon the things you find in that evidence. You can't just ask questions. Why does 2 plus 2 equal 4? Well, why doesn't it equal 4? And then you have to develop proofs and evidence and so on. Otherwise, you're just asking questions for no good reason, you see.
You know, what could cause me to believe again? Because clearly there's something that caused me not to believe. If I told you that I would pray for you, what would you ask me to pray for?
Oh, that's a great question.
If I told you that I would pray for you, what would you ask me to pray for? I don't believe it makes any difference, you see. Let me say this. If I asked you what you would like me to say spells over you for, if I asked you what kind of incantations you would like me to perform, what sort of rites you would like me to do over you, does it change your opinion of how that sounds? But if you want to pray for me, then pray that your God reveals himself. Pray that your God ends the suffering in the world, or at least the wars and the murder, or at least the pain that people feel because of it, or end hunger. Don't pray for me specifically, because I'm not nearly as important as the people that died in the Holocaust. You see, I'm not nearly as important individually. Like, don't pray for me to get a new car. Don't even, I guess, pray for your God to, intervene specifically in my life. Pray for him to stop the bad shit going on all over the world. And potentially all over the universe, in places you don't even know exist. That you can't possibly know exist. Pray for God to get rid of hell. Pray for God to make it so that mind-dissolving bacteria stops existing.
One evening she turned round and she looked at me and she said, "Where's Bob?" And I'm Bob, and the bottom dropped out of my world then.
Ask God why we were the ones that had to come up with a polio vaccine.
My parents didn't want this life for me. There was an epidemic, and children were dying just fast. And I've often thought about, in retrospect, how my parents felt. You're their only son. They had just buried you. They were taking their only other child to the same place. Can't you just imagine how that was?
And why he had to create polio and somehow let it on the ark and also not kill everyone, according to his narrative. why those things were. Ask him why circumcision is important. What impact it has on his heavenly glory. And so on.
Probably not for me, but for like my family, I think.
Pray for your family. Again, fine, noble, kind of selfish. Pray for the whole of humanity. Pray that God wakes up tomorrow, if God has a tomorrow. Does God have time if he exists outside of the universe? I don't know. Does time exist outside of the universe? Probably not, unless it exists in other universes. But the point remains, pray for literally everyone to be the best person they can possibly be, and pray that your God intervenes and stops the trafficking of humans for child sex slavery.
Yeah, just for them to be like well and good and happy.
Yeah.
From my perspective, everything you've said, you can do without any religion. And it's completely freeing for me. The most free I ever felt was the day I walked away and said, I don't have to believe in any of this stuff anymore. Because to me, God, religion, all of it, it's completely superfluous to human existence.
I think that's pretty well stated.
You don't need it. You can live a happy, productive, good, charitable life without it.
I believe in, if there's a good, there has to be a bad.
I don't agree with that, actually. I don't believe that just because someone donates to a church, that someone has to have their house burnt down by an arsonist. I don't believe that just because there are orphanages, that there must be orphans. I believe the orphanages can exist and eventually become empty, you see. I believe that the evil doesn't have to exist, nor the good. We could live in a neutral society, where everything is based upon necessity, and no one goes around harming each other for the heck of it. But again, I don't arbitrarily say certain things are good and certain things are bad like the Bible does. Like where it says I can just buy women. But that's just me, I guess.
We can't always explain some of the complexities and craziness of this world, but I think God brings gravity to it all.
Also, did she really just admit that God is the reason there is good and evil because it has to exist? Which means either that God can do nothing about it, and praying to him will not help, because he can't change it anyway, or does it mean that God is making them both in equal parts on purpose, and that's why it has to be there because God does it? I wonder. It's just a subtle argument, I guess.
To the question.
I love hearing what you have to say. I don't think I necessarily agree with all of it.
So I believe that God knows you. He knows your name. He knows how many hairs are on your head. And your beautiful hair, by the way.
Thank you.
So he also knows that you're a woman preacher, and you're not keeping your place by asking your husband to do the preaching, to do the instruction, and to give you your opinions. 1 Timothy 2:12. He knows literally everything about me, and he allegedly created me, and he's powerless to fix any of my flaws, even though he can pop a universe into existence just by saying the words. And he can make bushes burn without burning them down. And he can send the sun to be still for 3 days. And he can do all of these other amazing things, like giving Moses Superman powers to split water and turn snakes into rods. And he gave Jesus powers to, multiply the fish and stuff. And Jesus even allegedly healed people. But your God can't do it. He can only know the things. Okay, I guess. But you're not really going to convince me with that. You can believe it, but you're not going to convince me to believe it.
It's a purchased mind. Nevertheless, I think he knows everything about you and wants to know more.
He knows everything about you, and he wants to know more.
Bruh. Oh, jeez, okay. Oh, jeez.
I'm just trying to work that out.
Ha, gotcha.
If he knows everything about me, what else could he want to know?
Do you know the way? That does not make sense.
The Bible teaches that he made me. The Bible teaches he puts my thoughts in my head. He can harden my heart to believe in him or not. He literally decides my fate. He knows before he makes me if I'm going to heaven or hell. He knows everything I will ever do and ever have done. He knows what my suffering is like. He knows what everything is about me. But there's stuff he doesn't know about me, for some reason. Again, you're free to believe that, but you're going to have an incredibly hard time convincing me that you're correct, if your argument isn't even logical on its face. Speaking of which, one of the reasons Jesus came down as a mortal is so that he could understand human suffering, because God didn't. And that's why he was in Jesus or something. Why did he have to come down and learn that if he already knows everything about every single one of us? Again, I'm saying internally, this narrative doesn't make any sense, based on just the words she just used in that short little sentence. Even if you exclude everything else in the Bible. If you know everything, you can't possibly know more. Because you know everything, there's nothing you don't know.
This has been such a great conversation, and you're such a warm, I feel really, comfortable here.
I agree, the lady has a good personality, and she's good at selling her wares. And she's good at establishing that human connection that we all want, allegedly. But I don't agree that it's been a good conversation at all. It's just been questions and a subversive attempt to get us to believe in her God specifically. I wonder if we had put a Muslim there, or a Zoroastrian, or an adherent of the Norse pagan gods, or an actual Hindu or Buddhist and so on. Would she be telling us why their gods don't exist, for the ones that have them, or why their idealizations of the afterlife are wrong, and hers are specifically right? Mind you, they all believe in gods too, but I'm not sure if Buzzfeed has a video like that or not. Maybe I'll find out. So anyway, this video is at its end. We've gone through it, reacted to it, discussed it, or at least I have, and you've thought about it, and you're going to leave comments down below because that's the kind of person you are. If you didn't like it, you know what to do, but if you did, be sure to smash that thumbs up button. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button and the bell notification so that YouTube might tell you when I make another video. If you want to know how to get your name up here on the screen, be sure to check out my link to the Patreon down below. I make about one video a week right now. Go ahead and share this around. Let all of your friends know that we had a great discussion here with a pastor and some atheists and myself about why we do and do not believe. It's a good conversation to have, even if we don't agree. At the end of the day, these are all still lovely people, and I don't think they mean anyone harm by their actions. And as always, this has been Reverend JR, signing off.